Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. Super excited for today's show. We've got Dave Dubeau on the line with us today. So, Dave, welcome to the show.
Ryan, it is an honor. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure interviewing you last week on my show.
It's fun. It's always fun
Yeah.
doing this. When we do podcast swaps among podcasters, talking more to the people listening, it's fun because, I go on his podcast, he comes on my podcast. We get a little bit more, involvement with each other. It's just fun. So,
It is.
so let's do this. Let's talk a little bit. I know we're going to talk a lot about podcasting today, but let's talk a little bit about your background, how you got into multifamily space, and how you got into the podcasting space.
Yeah. So, Brian, I'm up here in the Great White North, British Columbia, Canada. Born and
Mhm.
raised, lived for almost 14 years overseas, 10 of those years in San Jose, Costa Rica. Had a business down there, got married, had kids, and then in 2003 dragged my poor Costa Rican family kicking and screaming back to the frozen hinterlands of Canada and settled down back in British Columbia. And everybody goes, Dave, tropical paradise, British
Yeah.
Columbia, why? Well, you don't realize what you got till you leave for a while, Brian. So,
Hmm.
a lot of Canadians complain about the weather and the government and different things, but we got it pretty good up here.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be a much better place to raise my kids, which it was. So that was 2003. And I started all over again from scratch. Hadn't been able to sell my business in Costa Rica, didn't have much cash,
Hmm.
zero credit, not because I had bad credit or anything, just hadn't
You're out of the
established
country.
credit.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you remember those late night infomercials? You too can get rich in real estate with little or no money down.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of them.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about? I guess.
Well, the flavor of my month at that time was a guy named Ron LeGrand,
Hmm.
quick turn real estate. So I bought his course and kind of translated it into Canadian, which basically is the same thing. And basically did like 18 creative deals in 18 months.
Hmm.
And that was kind of fun, kept the lights on. One thing led to another. A few years later, got into lease options. A few years after that, partnered up with a buddy in the multifamily space. And by that time, marketing's kind of my background.
Hmm.
So I came on as like a co-GP in that deal, in charge of shaking up the tree and raising capital. So that's
Yeah.
what I did. And that was my foray into multifamily. And since then, last dozen years or so, really been focused on working with other people in the capital raising space,
Hmm.
helping them to raise private capital.
Awesome. Awesome. Sounds like you've done several different things. Trying to remember the late night infomercial. I bought the Dolph DeRoos, no
Yeah.
money down course. I don't think I ever did anything with that, besides listening to it was CDs. This is the time where it was on a CD course.
Yes. Cassettes and VHS tapes, as I recall, if I
Yeah, I
recall some of
was
the
I was
stuff I got.
barely after that swap over when I bought this one out. I think they still had it. I think I had the option of choosing, by the way, but who cares about that? Yeah, you got a variety of experience in real estate, which is really cool. Marketing, multifamily, raising capital, and right now you essentially are helping other people crack the same nut.
Yeah. So these days, the last year and a bit, we've been working with syndicators, fund managers, capital raisers for larger type deals and helping them to connect with 20 accredited investors on average per month using a podcast. And it's a lot of fun. It's
Yeah.
very different and it's a very pleasant way to connect with these high income, high net worth individuals in a non salesy manner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And podcasts, they're fun to begin with, but I think if I've made one mistake with this podcast is not doing enough to monetize it or not doing enough to turn it into a lead generation machine,
Yeah.
right? And
I
so,
hear you. That's the same mistake most of us
yeah.
made. My podcast was the same way the first 3 or 4 years. I started mine in 2018.
Yep.
So the first 4 years, it was like a weekly show when I kind of got
Mhm.
around to it, trying to interview the Kiyosakis and the Grant Cardones and the Brian Briscoes of the
Mhm.
world, the big wigs, the
Yeah.
influencers, and hoping that I would grow a big audience and hoping that some of that audience would clue in that I knew a thing or two
Yeah.
and hoping they'd reach out and hopefully I'd monetize it. But it wasn't very consistent. It wasn't working very well.
Yeah.
And I was focused on all the wrong things.
Yeah.
And then, like 3 years ago, I happened to be listening to another guy's podcast
Hmm.
and he interviewed somebody way smarter than me. And the guy he interviewed said, Hey, I use my podcast as a lead generator.
Hmm.
So I interview the exact kind of people I want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I connect with them. And then I convert them and book them into a discovery call, into a sales call. I thought, wow, that's
Yeah.
brilliant. So you mean I don't have to worry so much about trying to build up this huge audience and trying to convince some of them to kind of reach out, and I can just go straight to the source and interview the people that I want. So I started doing that. I switched my show from, I went kind of crazy with this, Brian. Switched it from like a weekly thing to, at the craziest, I was doing 30 interviews a week.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I don't recommend that for anybody.
Yeah.
That's insane. But I changed the format as well. So instead of having this long-winded hour-long thing, and trying to fill up time, I made them short and sweet interviews, about 20 minutes long, very concise. And these days I backed it down. I do 10 to 12 interviews a week, batch them into 2 chunks of time. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my interview days. And when we're working with clients, we usually suggest that they focus on like 5 interviews a week. So just kind of blocking off 2 2-hour time blocks and doing it that way.
Awesome. Awesome. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, how do you pick your subjects? Yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by how this works. So you're interviewing your marketing avatar, essentially.
How about if I just dumb it down to three simple steps, Brian? So the
I
first
like
step
simple
is,
steps.
me too, man. The first step is we create a podcast, we create a show that appeals to our ideal avatar, our investor avatar. So give me an example. I know you've been doing this for a long time, Brian, but like if you look through your investors, the accredited ones, are there any commonalities? Like there are a lot of them a certain kind of industry, or a lot of them business owners, or a lot of them doctors or dentists, or
we get a lot of sales professionals.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Sales professionals. And I would say, a lot of times like a CFO, CTO of medium-sized companies. So sales
cool.
and kind of C-suites. Yeah.
Sales and C-suites. You know what? That might be a good name for a show.
Sales and C-suites.
Yeah.
So it rolls right off the top.
It does. That kind of, but that's the idea. So if you know that sales guys and C-suite execs are your sweet spot and you can speak that lingo really well with them, then you create a show all around that. So sales and C-suite success. Well, geez, I just go, right, boom, right there. And then the goal is, let's get as many of those kind of guys onto your show. Let's make this appealing to them as a place where they can strut their stuff.
Yeah.
And sales guys love to strut their stuff. So this will work nicely, right? So it's a way that we can feature them. We can give them a platform. We can interview them. And that's the whole thing. Let's create that show that appeals to that avatar as our guest and as our audience. It's not about Dave Dubeau, apartment investor. It's not about syndication. It's not about multifamily. Nothing to do with that. It's all about what the heck they care about, right?
Yeah.
And that's themselves. So let's create that show. That's step number 1. We know our avatar, come up with the title, the theme, the branding of the show. Okay. Step number 2 is, now we got to fill up your calendar with a bunch of those sales guys and C-suite executive guys of that kind of company, right? So good, beautiful thing is you got a pretty dialed in avatar. Finding those guys ain't that tough, especially these days. LinkedIn. So we got a whole team that does this, but it's LinkedIn. Find those lists, scrape them, get the data, get email addresses, get phone numbers, get the whole thing, and then go at them, invite them from different angles. Yeah. So through LinkedIn connections and direct emails and direct phone calls, the whole goal is, let's get 5 of them booked in for conversations every single week. So that's step number 2, find those people and invite them to be guests on the show. Step number 3 is convert those conversations into capital. So this is where the art kind of comes in. The other stuff is logistical stuff. Yeah. This is kind of where the art comes in. So what we always tell our clients is, hey, you know what? Less is more. You don't want to try and ask a gazillion questions here. So let's just come up with 4 or 5 or 6 kind of normal questions, kind of riff on those a little bit, go off on tangents. But the gist of it, Brian, is you start off asking your guest about what professional success looks like for them. What's your secret sauce in sales? What do you do different or better than most sales guys? Tell us a little bit about your company. So we get that kind of conversation going.
Yeah.
Then we combine, okay, how do you balance work and personal
Mhm.
life, like your work-life balance? Talk a little bit about that.
Yep.
And then we massage the conversation
Mhm.
towards financial stuff. So let's say we're interviewing Joe, the superstar sales guys of
Mhm.
whatever company. So, Joe, a lot of people in your position are making really, really good cash in
Yep.
sales today, but they're looking towards the future when they don't want to be working so hard for that money. And they're kind of,
Mhm.
a lot of people are starting to look at what else can I do to create income outside of work? What are your thoughts about
Mhm.
that, Joe? Right. So just kind of get them talking a little bit about that. Then we wrap up the show. Joe, if people want to connect with you, how can they do that? Blah, blah, blah. And then here's the magic. Here's where the magic
Mhm.
happens, Brian. After the interview ends and you're still on Zoom with your guest,
Yeah.
then you transition. And it goes something like this. So let's say you're Joe, the sales guy. So Joe, hey, congratulations on all your success and thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Now, Joe, we talked a little bit about what you're doing to create some outside income outside of sales. And you mentioned that you're starting to dabble in crypto or whatever the heck Joe mentioned, right?
Mhm.
So here's the trick. So Joe, let me ask you this. How do you feel about the kind of returns that you're getting with that investment, the security of that investment, and the
Mhm.
stability of that? Is that something that you're 100% happy with, or is there maybe some room for improvement? What's Joe probably going to say?
Well, hopefully, he's got some misgivings and he wants something better.
I don't care who we interview. We could interview Warren Buffett. They're always
Yep.
going to say there's room for improvement.
Yep.
Okay, well, hey Joe, that's cool. So we're
Mhm.
doing something really interesting with other super busy sales guys just like you
Mhm.
in the alternative investing space. It's with apartment buildings. And the great thing is, we're getting them very solid, steady Eddie, double digit returns on their money.
Mhm.
And one of the best things is we're also getting them huge tax breaks on their personal income taxes. Is
Yep.
that something you might be interested in taking a look at?
Mhm.
Boom. Book them into a follow up discovery call. And then that's where the conversion kind of happens. And we got to be
Yep.
careful with that, Brian.
Mhm.
I'd love your input on this as well,
Yeah.
because I find a lot of people just kind of go for the kill a little bit too fast.
Mhm.
So what we got to do is we got to think about what is the goal of the
Yeah.
discovery. So the goal of the interview is to create rapport, create
Mhm.
relationships, create curiosity, and get them booked into a discovery call.
Yeah.
The goal of the discovery call is not to immediately get them to sign a check for 100 grand for your next syndication.
That almost never works.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's like asking somebody to marry you on the first date, right? It's
Mhm.
too much.
Yeah.
But we do have to have a goal in mind. So here's my goal.
Mhm.
If I got somebody on a discovery call about an investment, I want to see if they're seriously interested and qualified or not. That's my goal.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the way I do that is show them like a typical deal and then say, hey, Joe, so we don't have any of these opportunities available at the moment, but when
Mhm.
we have one, is this something that you'd like to have first
Mhm.
dibs at, have first look at?
Yeah.
Yes, no. So we kind of find out, yeah. So we're not asking for anything solid there, but I want to get a
Mhm.
warm commitment. Okay. So they say yes. Okay, cool. So here's our next step then, Joe. We're just going to go through a quick little survey here and fill in the blanks, right? So then we get the information from them, gets automatically put into the CRM system, and they get
Mhm.
added to your hot to trot investor
Yep.
prospect list for the drip and the follow up and the coffee meetings and the webinars and the tours and whatever the heck you're doing to nurture your hot prospects.
Mhm.
Does that make sense, Brian?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it in
Absolutely.
a nutshell.
I like the way you phrase it. We don't have an active deal right now. That takes pressure off them. They
Yeah,
don't have to commit to anything. Takes a little bit of
exactly.
pressure off, and then they can give you honest answers without, and me personally, I've had a lot of high pressure sales. I don't like the high pressure sales, but
Yeah,
when you lead with that, they know they're not going to be in a high pressure sales situation at least. So yeah, I think
exactly.
lots of goodness to that as well. Cool, cool, cool. I used to have a different format. I think you came on with the old format where we had an aspiring investor as well.
Okay.
And a lot of
Yeah,
those
big.
aspiring investors ended up, being coaching clients, and so in a way, I guess I did the same thing because the aspiring investors, and this podcast was always aimed at kind of being a lead magnet for or lead generating system for coaching clients.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, and so when I was bringing people on for the interviews, I had the aspiring investor. They haven't done anything yet. I would say half of them were probably already in coaching programs, and Half of them were looking to get into coaching programs, but
Yeah.
I think where I fell short was the follow-up. I'd interview a lot of these guys, and like, gosh, this is probably I've probably lost a lot of investors because of lack of follow-up too. But just building that follow-up system, that follow-up call, and having that all built into your system, that would have helped me a lot. Probably left thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table by not doing that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a weakness of all of us,
mhm.
I tell you. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of getting it kind of baked in and just making it part of the process. And I'm sure with your investors now, you've got a much more robust follow-up type
Yeah.
program type
Yeah, yeah.
process. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I guess the other nice thing is, I mean, you post everything, but do you even care if you get anybody listening to your podcast?
Well, it's not the focus, but here's the cool
Hmm.
thing, Brian. Yeah,
Yeah,
you do. So here's what we do for our clients because we
yeah.
offer a done for you service where we basically do all this stuff for you and you just show up
Hmm.
and be the host with the most, right? So one of our clients, Matt,
Hmm.
I was talking to him not very long ago, and he had somebody reach out to him, had listened to his podcast.
Hmm.
And he said, Matt, it sounds like you know a few things about real estate, and I'm looking at a potential deal. Would you mind if I talked about it with you?
Hmm.
Matt said, sure. And so they
Yeah.
went over the deal the guy was looking at, and it sucked. And Matt told him so.
Hmm.
Oh, well, thanks so much. And then he ended up investing 75 grand with Matt in
Hmm.
his next syndication. And that was an audience member of the show.
Nice.
So it's
Nice.
not designed for that. It's really
Hmm.
designed to talk to the people that you want as investors. But the cool thing that I recommend
Hmm.
is that for your guests, that you help them to leverage their appearance on your show.
Hmm.
So we got to back up for a second. So imagine you're interviewing one of these sales guys, right? Chances are that sales guy has not been interviewed on a lot of podcasts before.
Right. Yeah.
Chances are zero, right, that he's
Hmm.
been interviewed on any other podcast. So what we want to do is we want to make it easy for him to
Hmm.
share his appearance on your show. So you can do that a lot of different ways. What we do is we create the full out episode and publish that
Hmm.
on all the major podcast platforms plus YouTube.
Hmm.
Then we let the guests know that their episode has been released. And then we also create those short form videos, those little skinny videos with the subtitles. We create 3 or 4 of those for the guest
Yeah.
and send them to them so they can post that on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever, whatever they're active on.
Yeah.
We also take the transcript of the interview, feed
Hmm.
it through good old ChatGPT, and create a LinkedIn article for the guest,
Hmm.
create a Facebook post for the guest, we create a Instagram post for the guest, whatever they need, and we deliver all of that to the guest on a silver platter.
Yeah.
So now they can strut their stuff
Hmm.
about their appearance on the show, and that gets us natural, high quality, organic traffic to the show
Yeah.
because those sales guys tend to hang out with other corporate type guys. That tends to be a lot of their social network.
Hmm.
And that's how we can kind of grow the show organically.
Okay. Yeah. So you're basically helping them to leverage the podcast episode itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which does help. That's probably something I could do better on. I mean, we're doing some of that. We send a little small blurb about, how, here's what you can share. And the way my brain is working right now is the more likely they are to share, that actually brings more listeners to your shows. I built a pretty good following on this podcast. It hasn't been my focus for a while, but there was a point where we were averaging 600-700 downloads per episode, which is
Nice.
decent.
Yeah,
And that was all off of word of mouth. That was all off of guests sharing. And so I
exactly.
think it's definitely a win-win when you're able to do that. The better you're able to set up your guest to share and take advantage of your podcast, the more people that are going to listen to your podcast, and the more people that are going to hit that subscribe button and, start listening to it regularly.
With
Yeah.
this model, that's not even our primary concern. That's just
Yeah.
kind of my
Hmm.
philosophy behind the whole thing, Brian. I call this kind of lead generation a way to
Yeah.
lead with the giving hand.
Yeah.
Like when you invite somebody to be a featured guest on your show,
Hmm.
you are giving them free publicity, free marketing, free exposure.
Hmm.
And even more importantly, you are bumping up their status in the eyes of their
Yeah.
network. That's really, if you boil it down, it's a big pat on the back, is what we're giving them. We're giving them public strokes, kudos, where they probably don't get very many of those at work or at home. And we are giving that to them on the podcast. We want to make it appealing for them to share this, to strut their stuff, to show off a little bit, because most people get so few opportunities to do that in real life.
I like it. I like it. Things that I was talking about, those are just the added benefits that you're getting for doing that. So, but cool. It's really fascinating way of doing things. Now, just a quick question. I mean, one thing we're doing right now a lot is, making sure we're doing a better job tracking. So we're doing a lot of, paid ads, which, a year ago, it's at some point I was hoping I'd never have to do paid ads. I was hoping I could do everything organically and whatnot, and then the market changed. But have you kept track of, closing rates, when you do something like this? So if you're doing 20 accredited investor meetings a month, which that's 5 per week, what's your average close rate?
Yeah, it's all over the board. The end close rate, because again, like there's a big difference between talking with somebody and them cutting you a check for 100 grand, right? Or 50 grand or whatever your minimum is.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what we can track is the conversion rate of interview to discovery call, right? Then discovery call to warm lead list or hot lead list. So what we found is most of our clients, they start off, they're a little bit rusty. They're able to convert about 50% of the people they interview into a follow-up discovery call. And then over time, usually pretty quickly, within a couple of months, they're able to bump that up to 70 to 80%. Booking in for that follow-up discovery calls. So at the end of the day, if you're getting 5 interviews a week, and let's say, life happens, so you might have one cancellation or reschedule or whatever, and you actually do 4 of them, and 3 out of those 4 become follow-up discovery calls. It doesn't take very long for that snowball effect to kick in.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this replaces everything else that you're doing. This is just a very good thing in addition to whatever else you're doing for raising capital. And it's just very consistent. I don't know about you, Brian, but the whole networking thing, I find very annoying and I'm not very good at it. So the whole schmoozy thing and the 30-second commercial and swapping business cards and stuff, that, and then trying to follow up and get people booked into coffee meetings and stuff. Not great. Not great at that. But I tell you what, when I switched over to having a podcast, and now you connect with somebody that you think could be a good investor, instead of trying to convince them to watch your, do your thing or go for a coffee meeting with you, just say, hey, Brian, man, loved our conversation. I would love to interview you on my podcast.
Yeah.
Is that something you might be interested in? Get you some free PR, we'll create some social media content out of that. Helps us grow the show. It's kind of a win-win. Is that something you might be interested in? Yes. Boom. Give them your card with your booking link, QR code to your podcast. Boom. Much better way.
And for people listening, it's amazing. I was astounded at how many high-profile people that would never just book a call with me are very happy to come on a podcast. Oh my goodness, Yeah, that's just basically it. I mean, there's a difference between, hey, I got some questions I want to ask you. Would you mind hopping on a call? Most people are going to be like, I'll pass. Thank you. But when you reach out and say, hey, I have a podcast, I'd love to have you on as a guest, for some reason, you might ask them the exact same questions and have the exact same conversation, but the only difference is now you're going to record it and put it in front of everybody else,
Exactly. Well, there's the value right there, man.
It's marketing. Yeah.
And these, think about it. Who are most accredited investors? It's like we just talked, sales guys. Well, they love getting free PR for themselves and their company, right? I mean, that's what it's kind of all about. So
yeah. Speaking of the accreditation, I mean, most of our sales professionals that are investing are accredited through income. And then once they get up in age a little bit more, they're almost always also accredited by net worth. When you start looking at that group, just like that sales and C-suite, the nice thing about it is those are the type that can invest in 1 or 2 deals every year and consistently do 1 or 2 deals every year. But
you want to hear something kind of cool that we've started doing, Brian?
Of course I do. Yeah. Yeah.
So think about, don't give me the last name, but think about the first name of that ideal sales guy that you're working with that's invested multiple times with you. What's their first name?
We're gonna go with Steven.
Steven. Okay. So would it be fair to say that Stephen is probably connected to a lot of other people just like him?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the trick. Let's say you interview Stephen
Mm-hmm.
on your sales and C-suite success podcast,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stephen's one of the first people you interview, along with a whole bunch of other existing investors. Then, when you've published their show, their episode, you can proactively go after Stephen's
Mm-hmm.
connections and
Yes.
say, hey, we're both connected to Stephen on LinkedIn. I just interviewed Stephen on my show,
Mm-hmm.
Sales and C-Suite Success.
Yeah.
Saw your profile. I thought you'd make an awesome guest. It gets you some really good exposure. Is that
Mm-hmm.
something you might be interested in?
Yeah.
By the way, here's the link to the interview I did with Stephen. You can check it out.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. Bang.
Yeah.
Invite all of Stephen's connections.
Yeah. That works well. That works really well. We're doing what we can to try to we do something. I mean, we do this with our current investors and people who are interested. We'll have fun activities, a little bit different, but if you can bring in referrals, you can bring in friends, you're stepping things up, a notch immediately.
And this is kind of an easier ask because we're not, yes, we've got to always be asking for referrals from your investors,
Yeah.
but
It's much
it's
easier.
easy.
Yeah.
It's easier for them to refer somebody to be a guest on your show
Hmm.
than to refer somebody to invest
Oh
directly, if you know
yeah.
what I mean, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But man, it's super, super awesome. I was actually thinking, and I might resurrect this idea. I mean, I've been doing this podcast for 5 years now, almost 5 years. We launched our first episode July 1st, 2020. So we're really close
Yeah.
to 5 years. And I was thinking of starting a second podcast that was very similar to what you describe.
Mm-hmm.
And the podcast title, and this is going straight after my avatar, was going to be Founded in Utah. And
Mm.
it was going to be for Utah founders. And that's
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest, when you look at the who's who in Utah, there's a lot of founders that hit it big, and
Yeah.
so yeah, the idea is, documenting the founder's journey. Now, after listening to you, I think where I'd fall a little bit short is, I was going to talk to any founder anywhere in the journey, but, if I really want to optimize this, I'd probably need to focus on the founders with a little bit more
Oh, yeah.
experience so they're accredited.
Yeah. So that's super simple. I'll give
Yeah.
you the formula if you like.
What's that?
Yeah, man.
You ask them?
No, it's even
Yeah.
easier than that. You look on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
use LinkedIn Sales Navigator,
Hmm.
focus on founders, CEOs, owners of Utah-based companies
Hmm.
that have been around for 10 plus years and
Oh,
have
and
10
that's one of the
plus,
drop downs on Sales
yeah,
Navigator.
10,
Yeah.
10 plus years, 10 plus employees. Pretty good chance.
They're worth $1 million.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That
it's that
makes
easy, man.
that easy. And for people listening, finding people like this on LinkedIn is super easy. I mean, LinkedIn was designed with like recruiters in mind, and recruiters, they want to filter, they want to find exactly who they're looking for, and you get the Sales Navigator, it's like $100 a month, and it gives you a lot more search tools. So if you're interested in doing this, first step, reach out to Dave Dubeau and he'll get, I'm sure you've got a playbook or something. Let's talk about how that works. How can you help people listening to do exactly what?
Well, thanks,
Yeah.
brother. Yeah. Yeah. So I put together a little book called How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month,
Okay.
following this exact thing we've been talking about. And it's a free little 68-page PDF
Hmm.
book, and they can get a copy in exchange for their name and their email address
Super
at my
simple.
website, which is called
I'm gonna,
20 accreditedinvestorsbook.com. So again, that's the number 20
mhm.
accreditedinvestorsbook.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able
Yep.
to see the sign right behind me and maybe even a QR code that may or may not work.
And I just picked up my phone to see if that was the resolution was good enough for that QR code to work. And the answer is yes, it
Okay,
does.
cool.
So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, so go grab the book, and then if you want to book a call, the next page has the calendar. You can book a call, and you and I can jump on and have a discussion, see if it's a good fit.
Awesome.
Yeah,
It
man.
sounds like an amazing opportunity. Podcasts, I mean, just kind of speaking to the people listening, podcasts are a lot of fun. I'll ask you this question, all right,
Yeah.
and see what you think. I remember when I had this idea to start a podcast, I talked with Whitney Sewell. Okay. And at the time, Whitney, I haven't checked in on him in over a year. He may still be running a podcast, but at the time he was doing a daily podcast. And I think he
Mhm.
had just gotten to, episode 600 or something. That's we'd been like 2 years in. And I was just asking him advice and stuff like that. And he said something. He's like, if I had zero downloads, for all the episodes that I've done, I would say it's 100% still worth it
Yeah.
because of the people I've met and the relationships I've created through this podcast. So, Dave, agree or disagree?
100% agree. That's the whole
Yeah.
premise of this.
Yeah.
That's the whole premise of this. It's all about who you talk to,
Hmm.
not how many listeners that you have. I mean, that'll
Yeah.
come. Nobody's going to be competing against Joe Rogan anytime soon. That's not our goal here. Our
No.
goal is let's just talk with the people we want to work with. Here's a beautiful thing. You know this, Brian.
Hmm.
When people come onto your show, they are excited to meet you. They are excited to be interviewed. They might be a little bit nervous if they've never been on a podcast before. So those few minutes that you have before you press record, that's where you're putting them at ease. That's where you're making them feel good. Then you start the recording and you have a pleasant, friendly interview. They come away from this
Yeah.
feeling great, sounding great, looking great, and with a very, very positive impression of you. And isn't that what we want to generate when we're meeting high income,
Yeah.
high net worth people in the first place?
Yeah, and it is really, really valuable. I mean, one other thing, I mean, if you're the type, you mentioned the multifamily conferences and you're not huge on networking. When you do go to those conferences and you have a podcast and you're interviewing people in your industry,
Oh, well, that's huge. Yeah.
people
That's,
know you.
yeah.
All right. And I remember I had a brand new hire and I was at the Best Ever conference. And, I didn't in any way plan for this, but he'd been working with me for like 2 or 3 weeks at the time. And we walk into Best Ever together. And so many people came over to me and say, "Hey, Brian, how's it going?" And it was just one of these things where, it was
You're
just
a
like,
mini celebrity now.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like I've got a podcast. That's how I know all these people. And I told him that. But, if I was trying to impress him by, how many people I knew, man, I mean, that's kind of a really good thing. And by the way, my podcast has turned into partnerships a lot. And I've had probably less than 10 people that have signed on for my full coaching, which is rather expensive, but I have definitely had people who've come on the podcast who I've later partnered with. So
Mhm.
lots of benefits just from the podcast by itself. If you can turn it into a money raising machine, even better.
Plus, here's one other thing we touched on earlier that people might not have caught on to. But if you want to get on other people's podcasts,
Hmm.
having your own and offering to do an interview swap
Podcast
is
swaps. Yep.
awesome. That is
Hmm.
an awesome way to get on some of the big players' podcasts as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's putting you in front of their audiences too. I talked about the organic build to my podcast, but this is largely how I did it is I went on podcast swaps with people who had similar audiences.
Mhm.
And guess what? Every time that I went on their podcast, I probably gained a listener or two. And every
Yeah,
time I went on their podcast, I did the same thing you did when we started out. Hey, Brian, it was great interviewing you last week on my podcast.
yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's simple. It really is, but it's also very, very effective. Podcast is a tool. And man, I'm getting excited. I'm getting more and more excited about my own podcast now.
good, man.
So
I think you're
yeah.
on. I love that founders idea, that Utah Founders
Hmm.
podcast.
Yep.
That's a winner.
I even had the episode art made and everything.
Yeah,
And, something happened. I don't remember what it was, but something
you got
happened
busy.
and it was just like it went to the back burner. But I,
Maybe it'll come to the front burner again now.
yeah, and I mean, the reality is once you know how to do a podcast, adding a second one's going to be super easy. It's
Yeah.
just like I know everything we need to do. It's not like I'm recreating the wheel.
Yeah,
It's
the only thing I would
yeah.
recommend there with the second one is maybe kick it up so it's not just a weekly show, because that's maybe
Mhm.
not the volume you need.
Yeah.
But maybe you're doing 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes a week on that one. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
daily show. Keep the episodes short and sweet,
Yeah.
the interviews, and just batch them up, do, a couple of hours once or twice a week, and Bob's your
Yeah.
uncle.
At one point, I was doing 3 a week, and I would at least one per week was a 10 minutes or less episode, and it was just me talking,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. Some of the episodes with the highest downloads are those 10 minute short and
Yeah.
sweet episodes.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want. It's your show, right? So that's
But
beautiful.
we were talking about this a week ago when recorded your podcast. You get too long, and if I were to plot things, length, do a little dot plot, you'd probably find that the longer the podcast is, the fewer people you get listening. Unless you're
To the
Joe
whole thing. To
Rogan.
the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're Joe Rogan. I mean, he probably doesn't have people listening to the whole thing either. But anyway, yeah.
I watch the highlights on YouTube whenever I
Yeah.
gotta come across them. That's about it.
Yeah, I've listened to set parts of several episodes. I've never listened to a single Joe Rogan episode.
They're like 2 or 3 hours long, aren't they?
They're
Crazy.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, ridiculous is the answer. But anyway, lots of goodness here, lots of fun stuff. And usually I ask, how people can learn more about you to finish the show, but we already talked about that. So I'll just remind everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, really simple. There's a QR code above his right shoulder, right? You take your phone, you scan the QR code. All right. But 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com is where you go. And oh, by the way, we'll have that link in the show notes for everybody. So Dave, thanks for coming on the show today. Very much appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother.